Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending this Mayoral Candidate Forum. I am Corrine Shepard, President of the Bloomington League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that never endorses any political party or candidate. Our purpose in hosting this forum is to provide you, the public, with the opportunity to learn more about the candidates so that you can make informed voting decisions. Your vote is your power and will result in your voice being heard. Election Day is Tuesday, November 7th, and in-person early voting is available here at Bloomington Civic Plaza starting September 22nd. We hope that this forum, as well as the candidate videos, which are posted on our website and that of the city, and replayed on Bloomington TV, will provide you with the information you need to assist you in making your voting decision. Thank you, audience, for attending tonight's forum. And thank you, candidates, for the time and effort you have dedicated to running for office and for participating in this forum. In these days of political polarization, we in Bloomington can be proud of all of our candidates for the efforts they make to run positive campaigns and for demonstrating the civility in this forum that is becoming of the office they seek and that reflects the attitudes and demeanor of our community as a whole. We ask that members of the audience not clap, cheer, or otherwise do anything that might disrupt the forum or the recording process. Thank you to the members of the League of Women Voters Bloomington and the Voter Services Committee for planning this event. Thank you to the City of Bloomington for the use of council chambers. Thank you to Bloomington TV for recording and broadcasting this forum on Bloomington TV. This forum will be posted for viewing online on the League of Women Voters Bloomington website, on the City of Bloomington website, and on YouTube. This forum will also be rebroadcast multiple times on Bloomington TV. Martha Mix is our moderator tonight. Ms. Mix is a highly skilled moderator who has moderated many forums. She is a member of the Golden Valley League of Women Voters. She will now identify the rules of the forum and will introduce you to the candidates.
Thank you very much. The League of Women Voters of Minnesota and our local leagues conduct candidate forums to provide the public with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss the issues that are important to members of the public. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidates. The views expressed in each forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. League of Women Voters Minnesota and our local leagues post complete, unedited recordings of forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for political purposes. The recordings of candidate forums in their entirety are the sole property of the League of Women Voters. And the purpose of this evening's forum is to hear the candidates for mayor of Bloomington discuss issues that are important to residents of the city. All candidates for mayor whose names will be printed on the ballot have been invited to participate in this forum. A copy of the forum rules was emailed to each candidate. A copy of the forum rules are also posted in the lobby adjacent to this space. We will try to cover as many issues as possible in the time we have, and if your questions are not addressed tonight, please feel free to contact the candidates directly. So here are the rules and format for tonight's forum. The speaking order will start to my left. Who will be candidate Bussey? Yes. And then candidate Clark. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 30 seconds for closing remarks. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each questions. And we have league volunteers who will be timers right sitting up in front here. They will hold up signs to show candidates when they have 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, and when they must stop. Perfectly timed. Okay, the forum will also have one more, might have a lightning round where candidates will be requested to answer a question very briefly, either in one sentence or with a yes or no reply. So as moderator, I will ask all the questions. League of Women Voters Bloomington and I will determine which questions will be asked in an attempt to, in good faith, to cover all the topics of interest indicated by the questions submitted by Bloomington residents to League via email prior to this evening and by attendees during this event. If you'd like to submit a question this evening, please write it on an index card and pass it to one of the volunteers who is collecting those cards. Card collectors, please raise your hand so they know who will have the cards. Okay, we've got, I see 4, 5. Thank you. So serving as question facilitators today are Douglas Clegg-Holm and Nancy Clegg-Holm, members of the League of Women Voters of Bloomington, sitting over here. And all submitted questions become property of the League of Women Voters Bloomington. No campaign material, signs, brochures, cards, buttons, or clothing with candidate information are allowed in Bloomington Civic Plaza. This forum will be video recorded, or is being video recorded, and candidates, please speak directly into the microphone so your responses are heard and picked up by the video. And when you speak, please look at the audience, not at me, because these are the audience's questions. So we will begin with Mr. Tim Bussey, candidate for mayor of Bloomington.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Tim Bussey. I am a candidate for mayor of Bloomington. Greatly appreciate your vote come November. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd tonight, but for the folks who don't know me, I want to do a brief background just to tell you how I got into my role here. My wife, Heather, and I have lived in Bloomington for the better part of 2 decades, and we live in the Southbrook neighborhood with our dogs Jake and Elwood, and yes, they are brothers. I served on the city council as council member at large from 2011 to 2019. I was sworn in as mayor in January of 2020. In many ways, my educational and professional background have really prepared me for the role as mayor here in Bloomington. I was an urban studies major at St. Cloud State. I focused on public sector management while at the Humphrey School, and I got my first taste of local government right out of graduate school when I worked for the League of Minnesota Cities. I was communications director there. I learned a lot about local government, and believe me, there was a lot to learn. I went from there to the University of Minnesota, where I worked in a department called University Services, which was basically the city government of the University of Minnesota, and it's a city of 90,000 every day. The department included the police, parking and transportation, facilities management, utilities, and so on. Again, a great experience and a good preparation for the work that I'm doing now. I served as an elected official since 2011 here in Bloomington, and when I say served, I mean more than just sitting here on Monday nights. I've served on the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, the Isaac Walton League Board of Directors, the Bloomington Port Authority, and on the Bloomington League, the League of Minnesota Cities Board. All of that is a way of telling you that experienced, informed leadership matters. Experienced, informed leadership matters. It takes an understanding of the community we all live in and an understanding of the issues at hand, and it takes a lot of discussions with a lot of people. I'm looking forward to this discussion tonight. Thanks much for being here.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Mr. David Clark.
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Clark. I'm a 20-year resident of Bloomington and have lived in Minnesota now since 1994, so coming up on 30 years. Previous to Bloomington, we lived in Minneapolis. I'm seeking office here in Bloomington because I feel that the city needs an outsider. The city needs somebody that can see things that the current leadership, in this case the mayor, cannot see. The mayor is experienced, but I'm an outsider, and that is my strength. From a professional standpoint, I have had my own business for 15 years. I'm also a commercial airline pilot. I'm an airline captain. I'm trained at the highest level to make good decisions. Flying the airplane is very little small part of my job. It's actually making decisions, forecasting problems, teamwork, anticipating issues, crisis management. All those skills are directly applicable to the job as mayor. I see a city that is good, but it could be great. I see a city that has taken advantage of some opportunities, but could be taken advantage of many other opportunities to make ourselves future ready. What does that mean? That means that we can withstand things that will happen in the future that we've not anticipated yet, and making ourselves strong and healthy and viable long-term like we are not now. So that's why I decided to run. People ask me, why did you decide to run? I decided to run because I care. I care about people that live here in Bloomington. I've gotten to meet hundreds of people. I care about elderly that live in their homes that may not be able to live here long-term because of the cost of living going up. I care about immigrants that have come here recently, just like my wife and my stepson, who are from Brazil. I care about other people that have lived here that are concerned about the direction of the city. So I'm here to bring an outside voice, a different set of ideas, an unbiased point of view in order to bring change to a city and take us from good to great. My name is David Clark, and I look forward to your vote by November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now begin the question-answer period where they each have a minute and a half to respond. I'm sorry, I don't see any easy questions here, so we're just going to dive in. This question, and Mr. Clark will be the first to answer. If bonding for any of the 3 Bloomington Forward projects, the Community Center, Ice Garden, or 9 Mile Creek, is not approved through the citywide referenda, how would you address the unfunded projects?
So the question is if all 3 of them don't get funded, or if one of them gets funded?
That's a good question.
Let me just answer it both ways. If all 3 projects get voted no, then obviously we have to go back to the drawing boards and figure out what we're going to do. And if just one of the projects gets voted yes, then there will be a 0.5 cent or a 0.5% sales tax increase, taking us over 9% here in the city of Bloomington. If I understand your question, how would those projects be funded? I think that one of the issues I have with these projects first is that we're seeking funding without knowing how the money is going to be spent. And that's a problem for a lot of people. That just doesn't seem right. And I just can't imagine that that's the gold standard for methodology in cities around the United States. Why are we approving a $159 million without knowing how that money is going to be spent? It's almost like that bill where Nancy Pelosi said you're going to have to pass the bill before you know what's in it. And that was obviously something that shocked a lot of people. So what I would do is I would sit down. I would first of all find the most effective way to do it. I'm not convinced that the way that it's designed right now, these projects are most effective. Second thing is I'd find other sources of funding. I'd go to corporations, I'd go to family foundations, other sources of income, and then the last step would be to go to the taxpayer. The taxpayer should be the last people that we go to for funding. There's a lot of other money out there that we could be going to first.
Mr. Bussey.
The City of Bloomington has a thick book called our Capital Improvements book, the CIP, the Capital Improvement Projects, and all of these projects basically came from that book. They were brought out because they have a regional impact, which means they could stand up for a vote to be funded through a local option sales tax. Anything that would be approved through a local option sales tax must have a regional impact. And so these 3 projects would indeed have that. If they don't pass, if any of these projects don't pass, they will be put back into the book and be evaluated against other projects in the capital improvement projects priority list over the next 10, 20, 30 years. The one caveat that I will give is that our Bloomington Ice Garden right now is working on a cooling system that where the coolant they are using over there right now is no longer legal to be sold in the United States. They're buying that coolant on the secondary market, not illegally, but they're buying it on the secondary market and keeping the coolant running. One way or another, if we want a viable Bloomington Ice Garden, we're going to have to address that. So even if the Bloomington Ice Garden project does not pass, it will have a priority, a fairly high priority, to make sure that we make the changes necessary to keep it as a viable Bloomington Ice Garden. It's just too important of a center of community here in Bloomington to simply shut it down. We'd have to figure out a way to make ice, plain and simple, and it would require an investment.
Thank you. The next question, it's now that marijuana is legalized in our state, what steps should Bloomington take to assure that it's a benefit to our city rather than a detriment? And Mr. Bussey will answer that first.
Well, it will be a financial benefit to the city and to all cities because of the cut that cities will receive from the taxation that takes place at the state level. Each city is going to get a portion of that, and so the city of Bloomington will get part of that. I think the way to make it a benefit within the city is to make sure that we regulate it carefully and stringently to make sure that we don't have any issues with the sale and the use of marijuana, especially underage. We've had the discussion at the city council whether or not to treat it like tobacco or alcohol, and it's an interesting conversation and one I think that we need to continue to have. If we treat it like tobacco, then it's a matter of it has to be behind the counter and you need an ID to purchase, and we'll do compliance checks and so on, and ensure that it's only purchased from a retail standpoint by people who are able to buy it. If we treat it as like we treat alcohol, which some have argued that might be the way to go because obviously it is an intoxicant, that changes things completely in terms of where it can be used, where it can be purchased, how people can, whether or not people can use it on the job, while driving, and a number of different issues. So it brings up an interesting conundrum. What we need to do within the city is make sure that we regulate it carefully and take steps to ensure that it doesn't become a problem, but rather that we can control it much like we control either tobacco or alcohol in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Now that marijuana is legalized in our state, what steps should Bloomington take to ensure that it's a benefit to our city rather than a detriment?
Well, I saw a news report just today that drugged driving, not drunk driving, but drugged driving is already up 98% in the state of in the state of Minnesota with this law. And I don't even know if it's in effect yet, if it's in effect or not. The law was a huge mistake by this legislature, and I already know that there are cities in Minnesota now that are severely restricting its use in their boundaries, even though it's a state law. I don't think it's the right choice for Bloomington. I don't think it's something that we should have passed in the first place. The fact is that it's passed on the state level, but we would need to restrict it and control it as much as possible here in Bloomington so it doesn't become a distraction and mainly a safety hazard for people. I also concern about secondhand smoke as far as people inhaling the after effects of somebody smoking marijuana. I've already smelled marijuana in different places of town as I've walked around, not Bloomington, but just in the Twin Cities. And I think it's a problem. I think we need to be talking to our state legislators and say, next session, you guys need to make adjustments to this law and really make sure that it's controlled. It is not something that we should be doing as a city. And I would look to restrict it in as much of a way possible, primarily for the reasons of safety and benefit for our population in that way.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Clark will answer this one. Please explain your perspective on funding the Bloomington Fire Department. Should there be any change in the funding for the fire department, and why?
I think it's pretty evident that the shift to full-time firefighters is something that we needed to do. I'm not so sure that we needed to build the brand new fire stations in the way that they were built, but it's a done deal. They're being built, and now we're going to make the most of it. I think that our firefighters are set up for success now. I think that their role is shifting as well. They don't just put out fires anymore. They do a lot of EMS work. And so I think that we need to continue to fund it. But I do have real concerns about the SAFER grant that runs out in about 2 years. Who's going to pay for that? I think it's going to be the taxpayers. And according to my calculations, it's north of $2 million. That's 18 firefighters that were paid for by a federal grant that runs out in 3 years. So that was passed last year. So now we're into 2 years when that goes to when that gets exhausted. So those are the kind of the ticking time bombs that we need to look at in our budget. I don't think we're going to be able to go and cut positions and get rid of firefighters so easily. And yet at the same time, we've taken on this expense. It's important to let the community know what's coming and just be honest with them and share with them that that's going to be something that we're going to have to carry 100% once that SAFER grant runs out. So it's our fire department. We're going to fund it, and we're going to make the best of it. They're heroes in our community, and we're going to back them up.
Mr. Bussey.
So the work we do here in Bloomington, all the work that we do, the programs that we establish, the money that we spend, all are based on the values and the priorities of this community. And public safety has been and will continue to be the highest priority within the city of Bloomington. The on-call fire department that we had for a number of years here in Bloomington, they did wonderful work, but it no longer was working in Bloomington. We had to make the move to a full-time fire department. It was simple as that. There were far too many times when fire trucks rolled with either 1 or 2 firefighters on those trucks, and that's simply not acceptable. We had to make the move to a full-time fire department. If it was going to be a full-time fire department, we had to have facilities where they could live and serve out of, and so that was the reason why we're in the process of rebuilding all of our fire stations. And yes, the SAFER grant gives us a 3-year buffer, but ultimately the cost of those 18 firefighters that were hired through the SAFER grant will ultimately become part of the Bloomington property tax expectations. We're going to have to pay for it in some way. Again, the firefighters, the public safety, it's part of what we value and what we prioritize here in the city of Bloomington. And we are going to have to realize that this is a cost that if we want to be a city of 91,000 with a full-time fire department, there's a cost associated with that, and we're going to have to pay for it through property taxes once the SAFER grant runs out.
Thank you. All right. Tim Bussey gets this question first. Do we have enough affordable housing in Bloomington? If so, what measures would you take to stop future development? If not, how do you encourage it and where do you put it?
I think we've done a great job in terms of affordable housing in terms of rentals. Each decade, the Metropolitan Council sets goals for each city in the metropolitan region as to how many affordable units should be in that community. Right now, Bloomington, I think the last I checked, we were north of 90% of our 2030 goal already. So we're doing a very good job in terms of the rental units in the city of Bloomington. And the rental units of affordable housing, they go anywhere from 60 to 80% of the area median income, which is how they determine affordable housing. So I think we've done a really good job in terms of rental properties. Where we're really lacking is home ownership opportunities for people. And I think we do need to continue to work toward that. Ownership obviously builds wealth. It's a bit more secure and firm housing option for people. Unfortunately, it's just a very, very difficult nut to crack in terms of how the cost of building new construction, the cost of renovating or using existing homes for affordable housing. It is a tough nut to crack, but I think we're doing a very good job with our affordable housing rentals. We need to do a better job, and we need to find a way to make affordable home ownership a possibility here in Bloomington.
All right. David Clark, same question.
Well, if you're like me, you've begun to notice these different apartment buildings flooding our city around town. This is something that a lot of neighbors, residents are not on board with, and yet we're marching to the Met Council's tune, not our neighbors and our residents' tune. We see apartment complexes popping up all over the place, and we're literally being flooded with apartment complexes. That should not be the standard of where we want to get people to live. It should be home ownership. Like the mayor said, home ownership is the thing that drives one of the greatest creators of wealth in a family, and that's home equity. But how do you do that when you're renting and you're stuck in a system of renting for the unforeseeable future? So my concern is that we're really addressing this from a short-term fix standpoint. Obviously, we're landlocked in Bloomington. We're not developing any more property. So it is a tough nut to crack. But at the same time, just flooding our city with apartment buildings is not the way to solve this issue. We're just going to create a whole generation of renters who are not going to be able to tap into the experience of building wealth through home equity. And what we should really be focusing on is really good jobs so that people can afford homes and move into them, no matter what the price. And I think that's where my focus would be.
Thank you. Next question, and David Clark will begin with this one. How do you envision the city's role in addressing the causes of climate change and mitigating its consequences on city infrastructure?
Well, climate change is real. We don't know, exactly, all the different causes of it. There's debate on that. The city obviously has a role in what it can do, but I don't think it should be something that's going to be cost prohibitive for residents or for businesses. Whatever needs to be done in moderation. There's only so much that we can do as a city to mitigate climate change. We're not going to move the needle on a worldwide basis. China's opening up one power plant per week in China. I mean, there are entire countries and parts of the world that are exempt from any agreements that are being made by the rest of the world. So we need to do our part. We need to do it thoughtfully. We need to do it with residents and businesses in mind and realize that the technologies are not here yet that we need. If we could flip a switch and be done with the internal combustion engine and petroleum products and fuels, I'm sure we would do that. But we're years, decades away from that happening. So we need to be realistic, and we need to do what we can through solar energy, through conservation, through different efforts in order to accomplish that. One of the things that I would do as a mayor is to have a reforestation project. I plan to plant 5,000 trees in Bloomington and work with different organizations like the Nature Conservancy to be able to put more greenery into Bloomington and maybe address it that way rather than cost prohibitive mandates on businesses and homeowners.
And Tim Bussey, the same question.
The two biggest contributors to climate change are, of course, carbon dioxide from automobiles and from home heating and building heating, basically. Those are the two biggest contributors to climate change. And Bloomington is working to address both of those in the ways that we're able to do. Now, granted, yes, we can't flip a switch and change this all. But everything that we do, if we all do our part, it does all add up. Bloomington has already established a program to help homeowners evaluate their homes in terms of insulation and worthiness and how tight it is, basically, and then offer help to increase the insulation or button up the house as needed to try and cut down on the use of home heating. We have instituted a program where homeowners have to disclose when they sell their home, much like you'd have to disclose a water leak or mice, disclose how old your furnace is, how old your windows are, if there's a leaky or drafty window. We expect that of them as well, and that helps buyers make decisions based on what they can learn and what they know about the quality of that home. Same things along with our businesses, just requiring them to report what they're doing from an energy usage standpoint. Doing things like that, small things, they do add up. Other things the city can do, and we're looking into EV charging stations. So the more people that have electric vehicles will have places to charge up here in the city of Bloomington.
Thank you. The next question, and Tim Bussey will answer this one. How would you address the issue of equity and inclusion with respect to Bloomington citywide festivals?
I'm exactly sure what that question is asking.
I will read it again and see if we can
If you
figure
could,
this one
please.
out. Yeah. How would you address the issue of equity and inclusion with respect to Bloomington citywide festivals?
I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking, but I will say I think we've done a good job of working toward equity inclusion and making sure that we have a variety of festivals that a variety of people can go and enjoy for a variety of reasons. We obviously have had Summerfest for decades here in Bloomington and is hugely popular. Our Wednesday night music right out the windows here is always just packed, along with our farmers market. So all of those that incorporate everybody in the community is just a wonderful way in terms of equity, inclusion. Everyone is included there. I like the fact that within the past 4 years we've also added additional things for people to find their own communities and celebrate with their own folks. The Pride celebration, which was a fantastic time, and we're in our third year of it as well. We've got a Juneteenth celebration. We have a variety of different celebrations for a variety of different groups, but that's not to say it's only for those groups. Those celebrations are city celebrations, City of Bloomington celebrations. I think people would have their eyes opened if they attend any of those festivals and saw just how inclusive they are in terms of being a specific celebration with a specific name on it, but the number of people who come and enjoy it just as a group, as a City of Bloomington, it really is an encouraging and exciting way to look at the celebrations within the city.
Thank you. David Clark.
I don't buy into the notion of equity. I buy into the notion of equality, and that we should treat everybody equally, and that any city-sponsored event should be open to everybody equally and give equal access to everybody. So we should be promoting things that everybody feels comfortable going to. That should be a principle. So when we have a principled approach to city events, then those should be some of the principles that go along with that. Now, if another private group wants to come in and hold an event and they want to rent space, I know there's space for rent here at City Hall, that's fine. But that would not be a city-sponsored event. City-sponsored event needs to be open for everybody, treat everybody equally, give everybody equal access, where everybody feels comfortable with it and that aligns with the values of the majority of the people. So those are some principles that I would have, and that we would certainly seek out those kinds of events like the Farmers Market, like Summerfest, and others that would really bring people together and not be divisive in our community.
Thank you. Our next question, and David Clark will answer this. Please offer your perspective on the Bloomington Parks Master Plan. What are its major strengths and/or weaknesses?
Well, the master plan is it's complete. I think it has some different aspects that that I think that begin to be cost prohibitive. I think that there's definitely a priority that we need to place in Bloomington on our parks. One of the things, for example, that I've noticed, for example, with the 9 Mile Creek project, is that you're going to have to destroy 9 Mile Creek in order to rebuild it in what the master plan envisions. That is something that I have a problem with, and that a lot of people are waking up to and realizing just what the implications are to this. How do you spend $20 million on 9 Mile Creek? You destroy it, you get rid of the canopy, you widen all the spaces, and you basically recreate it into something else. That is not what Bloomington wants. So number one priority has to be, what do people really want? What do people really want? What do they value? They go to nature to experience nature. And so when we start filling these spaces with concrete and with asphalt, and we get rid of canopy in order to be able to create a totally different experience, that's not what people want. So the master plan needs to really be a reflection of what the residents want, and not some outside idea of what we need.
Thank you. Tim Bussey.
And I would argue the master plan could not reflect the citizens of Bloomington more. The public engagement that went into that master plan was unmatched in terms of the work that we have done here in the city of Bloomington. The outreach into the community, the groups that came in were asked, that were engaged with, that offered their opinions, that offered their ideas about where we want as a community, where we want our parks to go and what we want to do with them. As I said, I've never seen that level of engagement in terms of anything we've done here in the city of Bloomington before. And it's interesting and actually exciting to see some of the changes that are coming about because of that. And I don't think they would have come about without that engagement. Tretbaugh Park now has a bicycle skills course. Without that engagement, we would not have probably gone that direction. Over at Smith Park, they're putting in a challenge course. Think American Ninja Warrior type course over at Smith Park. Again, without that type of engagement, asking people what they want, I don't believe for a minute that we would have done those kind of things. I think we need to move on as a community toward what we really want, not what we've wanted in the past, but what we envision in the future, what people would like in the future. I think the conversion of tennis courts to pickleball courts is probably the best example of that. It shows what people are looking to now as opposed to what they were looking to 30 or 40 years ago.
Thank you. Maybe we'll just do a little bit of lightning round with 3 different questions just to make this spice it up a little bit. And these would be very brief answers. First question would go to Mr. Bussey. Do you support ranked choice voting?
Yes, because the city of Bloomington, the residents of the city of Bloomington approved it in a democratically held referendum.
Same question. David Clark.
No, I don't. It's confusing. It's actually confusing statistically more for people of color, and that's a big problem for our minority communities. It passed by a very 1/5 of 1% during a very contentious election, and I think that we should reevaluate it and get rid of it.
Okay, next question. For the safety of cyclists and pedestrians, do you support traffic calming? David Clark, same question.
In where it's needed and by exception, but not as a general rule. That's one example where we don't want to become more like Minneapolis. We need to maintain our own nature here in the city, and we can use it on a targeted basis.
All right, Tim Bussey.
Without question. The statistics show very clearly the faster a vehicle is moving, if it hits you, the better chance you have of dying. To slow people down, as they're driving, to slow them down, and if there happens to be a tragic accident of some kind, I would much rather have those vehicles going slower, and whatever pedestrian or bicyclist that might be in the way has a better chance of living.
Okay, and the third lightning round question, and Tim Bussey will begin with this. Do you think that property taxes in Bloomington are too high?
No, I don't. I think, as I said, the spending in the city of Bloomington reflects the values and the priorities of the city of Bloomington.
David Clark.
Property taxes are too high. They're going to be 9 to 10% for the next decade. We've got a property tax problem. We also have a spending problem because we're unwilling to look at our spending. So yes, they're too high based upon our spending.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back to some regular questions. And we'll begin with Mr. Clark. How do you envision the city's relationship with artistry in the future?
Well, I think that ship sailed a long time ago. I think that relationship needs to, in fact, I think they lost their certification or license with the state of Minnesota. They didn't have some sort of a filing as of August 1st. But I think that that needs to end. We need to find a different tenant. If artistry is the best we can do, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
All right. Jim Bussey?
I think artistry and the city, it's a complicated relationship because of the financial issues that artistry has had and the poor reaction that they had coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was disappointing to everybody, and it was a tough pill to swallow to decide whether or not to keep supporting artistry or to let them close up shop. I think it's safe to say if we had let them fold and close up shop, this building would be dark 5-6 nights a week, as opposed to the work, the fun that goes on here now between the not just the shows that take place, but the classes and the art exhibits within the building and so on. And it would have greatly impacted, I think, also our resident art organizations or other ones like the Continental Ballet and others. It's a complicated relationship. That's why Bloomington, we no longer serve on their board of directors. We no longer have any direct involvement within the organization itself. We have sent them on their own and asked them to figure out their own ship. And I hadn't heard that they missed a filing of any kind. That would be news to me. I didn't know that. And but I also know that they're loading in the Putnam County Spelling Bee right now, so they must still be operating in some way, shape, or form. And I think, given that the arts in Bloomington have about a $15 million impact annually, I think it's a worthwhile relationship to continue.
Thank you. This question is probably more educational for others because I think these candidates can answer these very quickly. Are you required to file a report on your campaign finances? Have you filed one? Why or why not? So that would then go to Tim Bussey.
Yes, you are required, and yes.
Okay.
Yes and yes, and I think the next one is due late October 25th or 26th, something like that. So, yep, all the filings are up to date.
All right. I could have asked that one first, huh? Okay, and then our next question. Does the city do an adequate job of keeping residents updated? In the context of changing communication technologies and social media, what are your plans for ensuring timely and accurate communication with constituents? We'll begin with, Mr. Bussey. No,
I think it's me.
yeah, it's Mr. Clark.
I think the Bloomington Briefing is a great example of, a publication that keeps people informed. Obviously, it has a tilt that's pro-city and doesn't necessarily reflect what the residents are really looking for in terms of information. But I'll give you an example of the city's website or the Facebook page where they've shut down comments for the last 6 months because they don't want to hear what the residents have to say. That's just wrong. If that's how we're going to treat our residents with disrespect just because people are saying something that's contrary to the city narrative, that's a problem. So it goes two ways. People want good information, but they also want to be able to give feedback. And we've literally shut down comments on Facebook for the last 6 months, and we've never had comments on YouTube. Where's the transparency? So I would restore transparency. On day one, those comments would be restored, and the people of Bloomington would be once again respected, and their input would be valued.
Thank you. Tim Bussey.
There has never been more information available from the city of Bloomington than there is today. In the 4 years that I've been mayor, every city council meeting, and I think most of the commission meetings are now televised, there is a treasure trove of information available online that has never been there before. We've got the Bloomington Briefing, we've got the Community Outreach and Engagement Division, we've got the Council Minute, we've got a variety of different things that send information out to people. If people are looking for information, it's out there for them to find. And so I have no problem with that. I think we're doing a very good job with that in terms of getting information out to residents. In regard to the comments on the Facebook page, on the social media page, the reason we do information like this is to get information into the hands of residents. And our research showed very clearly that the snide and snotty and rude comments that accompanied a lot of our Facebook postings caused people to simply not read them. And that runs counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. And we turned them off. We turned them off to everyone because that's what we would have to do. We couldn't turn them off to the certain people. We had to turn them off for everyone, which is unfortunate, but it's one of those one of those deals that's why we can't have nice things. We're trying to get the information out to people. We want to get information out to people. We don't want them turned off by some of the negative comments, some of the rudeness and the. I will stop. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll have another question for you to answer right away.
Thank you.
Okay. Does the city do an adequate job of keeping? Oh, I already asked that one. Never mind. Okay. What do you see as the major environmental sustainability issues in our city, and what would you do to address them?
The sustainability issues, I think, go a couple of ways. First of all, we're behind. We're late in terms of renewables. I think we need to do a better job in terms of solar power, in terms of wind power, and look for different ways that we could start to reduce our carbon footprint through the use of renewables in the city of Bloomington. The other big thing that we have, I think, from an environmental standpoint is the degradation of our environmental areas with buckthorn and other invasive species, whether it's in along the river, along 9 Mile Creek, in the marsh. That, I think, is one of the bigger issues that we have in terms of environmental issues with the city and sustainability. And then obviously the big one that everybody can see pretty clearly right now is the loss of the tree cover because of the emerald ash borer. There are so many dead trees in the city, and it just, we knew it was coming, we saw it coming, but I think that like every other city, there's very little we can do to slow it or stop it because it's just continuing a march across the United States.
David Clark, same question. What do you see?
That's why I have this reforestation project to plant 5,000 trees in Bloomington. I fly over Bloomington routinely. From the air, I can see that the east side is more sparsely dense in terms of forestry than the west side. The west side is lush and green, and the east side is not. It's one of the easiest, lowest hanging fruit in the whole topic of sustainability is just to plant more trees. The trees do the work. They convert, that carbon dioxide into oxygen. So that's one of the things that we can do, but it's not the only thing that we can do. We can do other things as long as they make sense and it's not tax prohibitive and it's not unfair, like the organics recycling. Everybody pays for it, but only 25% of the residents use it. And a lot of people have a problem with that. It's only $5, $6, $7 a month, but it adds up. It's another tax that people are paying. And so, people become jaded when they get hit with costs like that, even though it's minimal, because they don't see that it's fair. Then they tune themselves out to the rest of the sustainability issue because of that one little thing. So we need to do things that everybody can get on board with, that everybody can see that it makes sense, that's not going to be cost prohibitive to the city. And that's why those 5,000 trees would be paid for with private donations and groups like Nature Conservancy and others where they would donate those trees to the city. None of those 5,000 trees would be paid for with city funds. And that's the number one thing that I would do. That's a long-term project to really increase sustainability in our city.
All right. David Clark, you'll be answering this one. First, if the new community center is funded and built, how will you assure services to seniors through Creekside are continued?
Well, that's the core of that facility needs to be for seniors. I think over time it's added on these different elements like health department and community center. We've gone from 70 million now to 101 million. By the time it's ended up being constructed, it's going to be 125 to 150 million. Who knows how it ends up, what it ends up costing? And we haven't even addressed the cost of operation. That facility will never cash flow when you look at what it's going to cost to build it. As far as seniors are concerned, I would make sure that we partner with some group that specializes in senior programming, like Presbyterian Homes, just right down the road on Penn, or other groups that specialize in senior programming. We would have the best senior programming out there, but it wouldn't be the city reinventing the wheel. It would be partnering with other groups that are specialists in this and bring them in to provide their expertise. Same thing with youth. We need to be partnering with YMCA or Lifetime Fitness or other clubs or groups that specialize in youth programming. So as far as the seniors are concerned, I would make sure that we'd be partnering with other groups that do this and do it very well, so that we would make sure we have the very best seniors facility out there.
Thank you. This next question, boy, we're finally getting even more questions here.
Can I have the opportunity to answer that question?
Oh, you certainly may.
Thank you very much. I mentioned earlier the Park System Master Plan, the outreach and engagement that went into that. And I would assume and expect the same type of outreach and engagement will go in to the programming around the new community center, to seniors, to youth, to families, to figure out the best way to put the programming in that building that best meets the needs and the wants of the citizens of Bloomington. And in terms of outside groups to do the programming, we've got really good programming. It's at Creekside Community Center, and we've got an outstanding staff that does outstanding work. And I would rely on the process to figure out what's best in there and then turn it over to our Park and Rec staff that already does outstanding work at Creekside and let them go and provide those services to seniors, to youth, to families, and to whoever else might be using that community center.
Thank you. And thank you so for politely
Thank you.
telling me that I have forgotten to call you. But I will let you come first on this one. What changes would you like to see in the way the city gets revenue? Sales tax, property tax, or user fees, or other?
Well, I think the sales tax we've seen is a good deal for Bloomington residents, because the work done by the Minnesota Extension Service shows that the sales tax, our local option sales tax, would be generated at about 2/3, 66% or so, from people outside of the city of Bloomington, non-residents outside of the city of Bloomington. That's the result of the Mall of America, our hospitality industry, our bars, restaurants, hotels, and so on. 2/3 would come from beyond Bloomington residents. I think it's a pretty good deal, and I think it's one that we need to continue to look at. In terms of user fees, there's an argument to be made for that. We work hard to keep our user fees as low as we can and as consistent as we can with other cities, but there is an argument to be made to say that we don't charge enough for ice time or gym time, or we could be charging more because we need to generate more revenue. We could have that discussion, and I think that's something we could talk about and think about. But again, then you don't want to put yourself into a competitive disadvantage in terms of our surrounding communities. So I think right now our sales tax is probably our best option. User fees are something that I would like to consider. Property tax, that's why we're looking at these other pieces. So to keep property taxes as low as we possibly can, we're looking at other options, including the sales tax and user fees.
Thank you. David Clark, same question.
I think it has to be a hybrid approach. Obviously, there's no silver bullet here. I mean, it's a number of things that have to take place. Property taxes can't keep going up at the rate that they're going up. It'll become unsustainable. If we continue to increase property taxes at the rate that we're going, within 3 to 5 years, Bloomington will become unaffordable for 20 to 25% of our people. That's a fact. So we have to really lay off the property taxes, or back off a little bit, take our foot off the gas pedal a little bit on property taxes, and explore other ways of funding things. The problem with sales tax is, with the sales tax, it looks like easy money. Out-of-towners are going to pay for it. So now we can go crazy on spending, and then what happens if there's a pullback? We're going to be stuck with the bill. We're always going to be stuck with the bill. And so that's the fundamental philosophical problem I've got with the sales tax, is that it's going to cause us to spend way more than we should be spending, anticipating we're going to have this revenue stream for 20 years and not anticipating any hiccups in that process. There's other funding sources. There's naming rights that could be done for the Bloomington Ice Garden or the community center, just like we did for Schneider Arts. Schneider's a family that gave $1 million. They got their name on the front door. Great. We can do that for the Bloomington Ice Garden. We got corporations in town. We got Toro, we got Donaldson, we got Ziegler, we got Mall of America. We got other companies we could go to and say, we need $1 million each for the Bloomington Ice Garden for our youth, or for the community center. We've got families that could also donate from their foundations. So there's different sources of revenue that we're not exploring now, but that we should be, and I would certainly push for that.
Thank you. Next question. Should more time be dedicated to public comments during city council meetings? Why or why not? And that's David Clark.
I think it's adequate. I think right now it's, half an hour, something like that, 30 minutes. That should be enough for people to comment. I do have a problem with moving it to a different room in the city. in the City Hall here. But I can also see the positive aspect of that too. Before, when we had public comment here in the chambers, it was just a one-way conversation. It was frustrating for the speakers, it was frustrating for the council members, it was cumbersome, and it just didn't work. You couldn't have a conversation. At least now you can have a conversation. So, I think that the decision was made, and it's in a room that's outside of council chambers. It's not as visible, but at the same time, it promotes a conversation. I think the 30 minutes is what I believe it is adequate, and if there's more conversation that needs to take place, then that can be done through a private meeting or some other thing. But as far as public comment, I think it's fine the way it is right now.
Thank you. Tim Bussey.
It is indeed 30 minutes, and I think in the times that since we moved to a listening session format as opposed to the public comment period, I think there's been once or twice where we've actually had too many people, and we've had to deal with overflow or really shorten everybody's available time. So I do think 30 minutes is the correct time. I also think the conversations that we're able to have are so far superior to the one ways that we used to have down here in the council chambers. It's less intimidating. It's more of a back and forth between the council and the residents, and it's bringing in new people. We just saw another person we had never seen before last night, and we had a very nice conversation about Bryant Park. We seem to see somebody new weekly, and that's encouraging to me because it tells me that people see it as a viable option to come and address their council members in a non-threatening way, without the pressure of the TV cameras, without the lights, without people sitting behind them, and it's a good way to do it, and I think the timing is about appropriate as well.
Thank you. This next question, and we'll begin with Tim Bussey. How do you envision the city dealing with the homeless now and in the future? Do you support housing them in hotels? If so, for how long?
Bloomington has a homeless issue. Just like every other community in the Twin Cities, Bloomington has a homeless issue. A good number of them are under the age of 18. A good number are the victims of abuse. I think more than half have a disability. We have homeless in Bloomington now, and they're doing what they can to try and survive. And I do think as a community, it's something that we need to consider and address. And I don't know that the hotels are necessarily a viable option, although I will say, it came to light during the pandemic. We saw the homeless folks being housed in our hotels. They were living in our hotels prior to the pandemic, and they're living in our hotels now. And just on their own, without county involvement, without social service involvements, people are doing what they can and living in our hotels. We as a community, I think, need to have that conversation, how we deal with that in a humane way, in a way that reflects the values of this community, and a way that protects some people who are very vulnerable in very many ways, whether it's through age, family situations, illness, mental illness, addiction. As a community, I think we need to have that conversation about how we address those issues.
Okay, Mr. Clark.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How do you envision the city dealing with the homeless now and in the future? Do you support housing them in hotels? If so, for how long?
Okay. Well, obviously, by the time people come to Bloomington and they're homeless, it's been a long path for them. It's been a difficult path. And homelessness is a complicated issue that involves a lot of the things that the mayor said, mental illness, alcoholism, drug addiction, a lot of things. And I think that where we're doing the homeless a disservice is by not really addressing the root causes of the problem. How did they get to where they are, and how did they end up where they ended up? So while it's important to house them and take care of their basic needs, what are we doing to help these people get back on their feet again? By addressing things that is unpopular and is not, people don't want to talk about, like the breakdown of the family, or the lack of fathers and the role of fathers in the home, or other things that, we've just passed a law to legalize marijuana, and yet we're concerned about homelessness. What do you think marijuana is going to do to the homeless problem? It's like we're fighting against ourselves. We're putting our feet on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. So we really need to take this seriously. There's nothing that Bloomington can do alone about it. We need to work with regional authorities, with other addiction specialists, with Hennepin County. This is a wider problem than just Bloomington. So we can do our part, but we really have to start getting to the root causes, or this problem is just never going to go away. And it's not something that we should accept as a civilized society. We should really be working to get rid of homelessness altogether so we don't have to house people.
Thank you. Our next question, and we will begin with David Clark. The MSP Airport is receiving $21 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law to upgrade terminal facilities. What effects, positive or negative, might this have on Bloomington, and what actions should the city take in response?
Well, we are fortunate to be on the doorstep of the 8th largest airport in the United States. I know a little something about that airport because I've worked out of there so many years. I think that one of the biggest concerns that surrounding communities have is noise. I lived in South Minneapolis when they had a huge noise problem, and the city actually, or the MAC, the Metropolitan Airport Commission, actually paid for people to insulate their homes, and I was one of those homes. So we got new windows, new insulation, new doors, and it really helped cut down on the noise. That problem's primarily been taken care of just because the homes around the surrounding area have been taken care of from an insulation standpoint, but the aircraft have gotten quieter too over time. And so I think that whatever improvements, I'm not familiar with that plan, but whatever improvements that are made to the airport to make it more efficient, to make people move better, is going to just help Bloomington because it's going to make it easier for people to come here by flying into MSP and then also getting to the Mall of America and getting to other parts of Bloomington. We don't want people just to come to the Mall of America and be done with their visit to Bloomington. We want them to spread out and go to other places in the city and discover other things. Bloomington Ice Garden, the ski jump, the business district, and so forth. So whatever other improvements are made, I would support that, and but I would make sure they were good for Bloomington, and that the MAC understood our viewpoints and whatever concerns we had would be taken seriously.
Thank you. Same question, and that would be for Tim Bussey.
MSP is an enormous economic driver for the Twin Cities region and for Bloomington in particular. And the only drawback I can feel is they always seem to be under construction. As long as I've been alive, it seems like there's been a construction project going on out at MSP. But the results are there. They're one of the best airports. They are the best airport in the United States, and I think have been for a number of years straight. And as I said, the economic impact for Bloomington is fantastic. And the fact that the reputation that precedes the airport leads so many other airlines from other countries to choose MSP. I saw that Lufthansa is going to be flying in now. I know that Aer Lingus is finally starting back up again. It's such a benefit for us in the Twin Cities and for Bloomington to bring tourists to the Mall of America and, yes, to the rest of Bloomington as well. We have a wonderful relationship with the folks at the MAC. We've got both staff and elected officials who serve on the Noise Oversight Committee, so working on the specific noise issues that are of concern. And at the higher levels, we have a very good relationship with the chairman of the MAC, with the folks who are on the council itself, and with a lot of the staff members. So I'm fully in support of the Metropolitan Airport Commission and MSP for the work that they're doing.
Thank you. Our next question. Do you think that too many city council decisions are made with the unanimous 7-0 vote? If you were elected or re-elected, would this change? Which issues would you be willing to go against the majority of the city council, and why? So,
I think one of the benefits when we moved our study sessions down to the council chambers here and kind of made them part of our full council meetings, people could see basically the sausage making that goes into the decision making. If you watch our meetings, we'll talk about something at 2 or 3 meetings before the vote comes up. And the reason we have a lot of 7-0 votes is because we have hammered through hours and hours of discussion on a topic before it comes to a vote. And the compromises were made, we hashed things through, we argued back and forth, and ultimately as we end up with something that we can all support. That's where this notion of, well, it's always a 7-0 vote because they're always in lockstep. No, it's because we've worked through the process and we've come to a decision as a group as to what we want to accomplish with this. And I think it's also a misnomer that there's 7-0 votes. I think we had 2 or 3 votes last night. We had at least 1 or 2 dissenters and a lengthy discussion. I mean, if you watch our council meetings, you can see it all kind of work through and the conversations that we do have. And so I think we have good, healthy discussion among our council. We have a difference of opinion on a lot of different issues, but we get to a consensus, and by the time we come to a vote, one way or another, we have hashed through the issues and come to a decision.
All right, David Clark.
I don't know the statistics on 7-0 votes. I know every vote is not 7-0, but many of them are. And the reason is because there's a lack of diversity on the city council. And that is a really big problem. It does not adequately reflect the diversity that exists in our community, the diversity of viewpoints, the diversity of ideology. We have small varying degrees of one particular ideology that exists on the city council today. And that's why elections matter. That's why elections exist, is for periodically for the population to rebalance and recalibrate their governing bodies. And in this case, this year, it's the city council's turn. Next year, it'll be president and, well, all the other offices that are up for election. This is your chance as residents to rebalance this city council, which is tilted in one direction. That's why you see 7-0 votes. And yeah, a little bit's because there's, discussion ahead of it and so forth. But for the most part, it's because they're all in lockstep with each other, and they're coming to similar conclusions because of their ideology. Bloomington deserves better. Bloomington deserves a diverse, balanced, wide range of opinions in order to come up with consensus and decisions that truly represent people. I would vote against spending increases, tax increases, things that would start to really encroach on the financial freedoms of people.
Thank you. And we'll begin the next question with you as well. If required to break the tie in a council vote, how would you evaluate whether to vote aye or nay? Or yes or no?
Well, I would go back to, I would really listen to the residents. And that's what's lacking in Bloomington. We don't listen to the residents. We spend our time trying to convince the residents to go along with what the city council has already decided. That's the impression. And that the residents are not truly represented. So I would take a residents first approach. Even more important than my own ideology or my own viewpoint, what do the residents want? And if I didn't know how the residents wanted, then I'd go back to the residents first before I took that vote. And I'd make sure I know what the residents want and really get their input. We have to have a residents first approach. And we can't keep making decisions based upon outside forces and outside groups and outside interests and then just railroad the residents in the decision-making process. It doesn't work that way. At least it won't work that way in my administration. So how would I break the tie? I would really figure out what is it that most residents want, and then I would go with that, independent of my own personal viewpoints or ideology.
Thank you. Okay, and then we will hear from Mr. Tim Bussey.
Thank you. I think it's absurd to say that the city council doesn't listen to residents. I know my council colleagues are out in the community constantly, have constant contact with folks, feedback from both sides of every issue, and base their decisions on what they hear from the residents of Bloomington. And it's the darndest thing, this non-diverse council was elected by the people of Bloomington, overwhelmingly, for the last 2 or 3 elections. And so this isn't some sort of fluke, or this wasn't foisted upon the city of Bloomington. This is what the city of Bloomington has chosen. And this is what the city of Bloomington supports, and the work that we do reflects the city of Bloomington right now. If it came down to a tie vote, I would go with the information that I had in front of me. I would base it off of the feedback that we've received as a council and the feedback that we generally would receive in a public hearing, and I would vote accordingly for what I thought was the best decision to be made.
Thank you. The next question, I didn't ask you, did I?
No, he started with it.
I think you did.
Okay, got it. All right, so the next one is Bloomington is poised to evolve during the next decade. What aspect of that change would you most like to foster? If elected, how would you, as mayor, apply your influence? And that will begin with you.
I think the way that Bloomington is poised to evolve most in the next 10 years is in its economy. And currently we have, obviously, the hospitality economy. The hospitality sector is king in Bloomington, and we all benefit from it in so many different ways. But I see it starting to shift just slightly, and I think it's going to pick up the pace in the next decade. And that is toward a high-tech manufacturing economy. And we can see it already with our friends from SICK Industries, and we can see it also in the work that's underway in our microchip industry in the city of Bloomington. Microchips were basically invented here in Bloomington with control data back in the 80s. When control data broke up, a lot of those companies remained in Bloomington and are now, because of the Federal CHIPS Act, poised to expand and grow considerably and add a number of jobs. It could possibly be up to 1,000 new jobs in the city of Bloomington in the high-tech industries alone in the next 10 years. And so I think that will be the biggest change that we're going to see. We're going to see changes in a lot of different ways, but I think that's going to be the biggest and most noticeable change within the city is a shift not away from, but in conjunction with our hospitality industry will be the high-tech manufacturing industry.
Thank you. And then Mr. David Clark.
I think it's along those similar lines of economic development, of really positioning Bloomington as the crown jewel of the Midwest as to where to base a company, and that we should be going after companies and startups and incubators to really base themselves here, not just in the South Loop, but across Bloomington to really develop us, because that's the engine, that's the economic engine of the city. Where I have a problem with the city and with the mayor is this Johnny-come-lately strategy where this is all of a sudden now the thing to do. When we should have been doing this 3 years ago, we should have been going after business. And instead, we've wasted precious time on any number of controversial, radical issues, and now we're finally getting around to talking about building up the business community. Better late than never. But that's something that I would do on day one. I would go out to the current business community, find out what kind of things they need to expand. I would also go to other places in the United States and invite them to bring their business here. I'd go to startups. I'd go to new technologies, whether it's AI or green energies or hydrogen or any kind of other place that wants to be able to base in a place like Bloomington with a great workforce and a tremendous location. And so that would be just the most important thing would be that economic development. That is going to be what's going to drive the economy and help people to live, work, and play in the same place and not spend valuable hours each day driving to another part of town just to work their job. They could do it right here.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll begin with David Clark. If you could change one thing about our zoning code, what would it be and why?
Well, I'd strengthen it, not weaken it.
Okay.
I would strengthen it. We just weakened our zoning codes, and it infuriated a lot of residents, and they weren't listened to. And we had an opportunity to listen to residents, and instead we listened to outside interests that want to change what our city looks like. So I would not just bring the zoning code back to what it was before. I would actually strengthen it and make it so that it's stronger and really protects our neighborhoods and protects our business districts and really makes Bloomington set up for growth, because zoning instills confidence. Without confidence, you're not going to have investment. You're not going to have people. You're not going to have livability. When you weaken zoning, you take away confidence, which is the ingredient. It's the magic ingredient for any business to decide what they're going to do, or any homeowner to decide what kind of improvements or where to buy or where they're going to live. So zoning has to not just go back to what it was, it actually has to increase and become stronger. That's my answer.
Thank you. Tim Bussey.
What I would change in our zoning code is what we've actually been doing is reacting to current conditions and looking toward the future and trying to figure out what would be best for the city in terms of future zoning and how we want the city to look. Great example was last night. We rezoned some properties on Lyndale Avenue in the Lyndale Avenue corridor with the intention of trying to develop over the next 30 or 40 or 50 years what Lyndale Avenue looks like, how to make it less car dependent, how to make it more pedestrian friendly, how to make it an area that isn't just where people zip through very quickly on their way to and from auto part shops, but actually a place where people can be and live and to enjoy the city. Similarly, evolving as a city means sometimes changing our residential codes as well, which is what we did just a few months ago. We made it possible for more homes to be built within the city of Bloomington. We talked about affordable home ownership. That is the number one thing that a city can do toward affordable home ownership is to change zoning regulations to make it easier to build homes, affordable homes. So you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and say, we need affordable home ownership, and then at the same time say, but do it in the existing zoning where the lots are way too big, where there's a requirement for a 4-car garage, where there's just, it's untenable to do that. You got to pick one or the other. Bloomington picked the opportunity to try and make housing available to people who can't otherwise have it.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next question. As Bloomington continues to develop into a healthy community, what specific steps would you take to eliminate the toxic effects of pesticides on people and our natural environment? And we begin with Tim Bussey.
I think homeowner education regarding pesticides, I think we've done a good job already on that, but I think that just needs to continue to make sure people understand the desire to have that green grass and that perfect garden sometimes is not best for the environment and not best, certainly not best for people and best for the ecosystems around us. So I think the homeowner in education on that, more options and more possibilities for folks who would like to garden. I know we've talked at length about no mow May, and we've talked about gardens, naturalizing gardens in front yards as backyards and side yards and so on. That would be a possibility as well. I think from a city standpoint, we've had that discussion and the balance between, do we want that perfect pristine park, or are we okay with dandelions? Are we okay with grubworms in the park? And it's a trade-off. It's a discussion that we have to have and have to make, again, a decision we have to make as a community. I think it's something that we've worked very hard to certainly minimize the use of pesticides and for that matter, herbicides in the parks, and we'll continue to do so. But again, it's that trade-off of some people just can't stand the sight of a dandelion, and we've got to make sure that we balance the needs and wants with the environmental realities around it.
Thank you. David Clark.
I think I'd focus more on education, and it's the slippery slope is when the city tries to micromanage everything that people are doing right down to their lawns. So I would focus more on the education aspect of it. I'd get with the big providers like Home Depot and Menards, maybe has some coupons or financial incentives to use new products that aren't as damaging to the environment. And just let people make their own decisions. Most people will keep up their lawns and their property based upon peer pressure around them. I mean, you don't want to be the only person on the block with a messy yard. So most people, they consider that a source of pride. They use products to keep it that way. I know that more and more people are going to electric mowers and robots and so forth to be able to cut the grass. But those are things that the free market decides. The city only has so much that it can do and say in telling people how to manage their properties. But they can inform them, and they can help them understand what the benefits are. They can hold classes. They can, again, provide financial incentives through coupons or rebates or whatnot through private vendors like Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's, others, to be able to give people access to products that they might not have known about. I mean, if I knew of a product that was less toxic for my lawn, I'd probably buy it just because I want to be that person that's sensitive to that. So we would help people to know that and then use the communications tools of the city to get that word out.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the question-answer period, and I'm sure that the candidates are very happy about that. You've had quite a bit of questions. My goodness. We're coming to the closing remarks, and we will begin with David Clark. 30 seconds to make your closing remarks.
Sure.
Each of you.
Thank you. Well, Bloomington has a choice. That's what elections are about, is choice. You can have a person who's been in city government now for 12 years, and which is an eighth of a century, and can continue on and take us down the path that we're going, which a lot of people feel that we're not on the right path. Or you can have an outsider. You can have somebody that comes in with a fresh set of eyeballs, who's qualified for this job, who's done a lot of things to lead myself up to this position and really get a different set of eyeballs on the problem. So that's the choice. The current person that's been here a long time, or an outsider.
And now we'll hear from Tim Bussey.
First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this candidates forum. As always, outstanding work. Thank you so very much for doing that, and thanks for your work protecting democracy here in Bloomington and everywhere. So thank you so very much. Thank you to all of you for being here this evening. It's a beautiful night, and you decided to stop in, so thank you so very much. do the next step now. Make sure you vote. Bring a neighbor along. Make sure they're informed when they go vote. And I would greatly appreciate it if, as you vote, you cast your vote for me. Thanks much for being here this evening. I really do appreciate it.
And thank you so much to the candidates for participating in this forum and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. Thank you to the City of Bloomington for technical expertise and the use of the council chambers. Thank you to the League of Women Voters Bloomington for sponsoring this forum. And thank you to this evening's volunteers. Thank you for the audience for being here. This forum has been video recorded in its entirety and can be viewed unedited on YouTube. Links will be posted on the City of Bloomington website and on the League of Women Voters Bloomington website. It will also be rebroadcast on Bloomington Cable TV until Election Day. Welcome and thank you to future online and cable TV audiences. And remember to vote on or before Tuesday, November 7th. For information about registering to vote, vote early and voting in person, and voting early or voting in person, and visit the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, www.minvotes.org. You can also find more information about candidates' online ballots or online guides, voter guides on vote411.org. Let's give them all a round of applause. That was wonderful. And audience, you're invited to visit informally with the candidates and league members immediately following the forum. And this concludes tonight's forum, and thank you again.